Hey guys, so it's been a little bit since I've been able to read. I have some time today, so I thought I'd sit down and read for you guys. So, chapter 31 and 32. Stanley angrily dug his hole into the dirt. He was angry at everybody, Mr. Pendanski, the warden, Zigzag, X-Ray, and his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-grandfather. But mostly he was angry at himself. He knew he would never have let Zero dig part of his hole for him. He still should have taught him how to read. If Zero could dig all day and still have the strength to learn, he should have been able to dig all day and still have the strength to teach. He thought. What he should do, he thought, was go after Zero, but he didn't. None of the others helped him dig Zero's hole, and he didn't expect them to. Zero had been helping him dig his hole, and now he had to dig Zero's. He remained out on the lake, digging during the hottest part of the day, long after everyone else had gone in. He kept an eye out for Zero, but Zero didn't come back. It would have been easy to go out after Zero. There was nobody to stop him. He kept thinking that what he should do. Maybe he could climb up to the top of Big Thumb. If it wasn't too far away, and if it was really the same place that his great-grandfather found refuge. And if, after 100 years ago, the water was still there. It didn't seem likely. Not when the entire lake had gone dry. And even if he did find refuge in the Big Thumb, he thought they'd still have to come back there eventually. And they'd both have to face the warden and her rattlesnake fingers. Instead, he came up with a better idea. Though he didn't have it all quite figured out, he thought that maybe he could make a deal with the warden. He could tell her he really found the gold tube, and she wouldn't scratch Zero. He wasn't sure how he'd make a deal without getting himself into deeper trouble. She might just say, "Tell me where you found it, or I'll scratch you too." Plus, it would mean X-Ray would get into trouble too. She'd probably scratch him as well. X-Ray would be out to get him for the next 16 months. He dug his shovel into the dirt. By the next morning, Zero had still not returned. Stanley, one of the counselors sitting guard by the water spigot outside of the shower wall. Mr. Pendanski had 2 black eyes and a bandage over his nose. "I always knew he was stupid," Stanley heard him say. Stanley had required to dig only one hole for the next day. As he dug, he kept a constant watch out for Zero, but he never saw him. Once again, he considered going out onto the lake to look for him, but he began to realize it was already too late. His only hope was that Zero had found God's thumb on his own. It wasn't impossible. His great-grandfather had found it. For some reason, his great-grandfather had felt the urge to climb to the top of the mountain. Maybe Zero would find the same urge. If it was the same mountain, if the water was still there. He tried to convince himself it wasn't impossible. There had just been a storm a few days ago. Maybe Big Thumb was actually some kind of natural water tower that caught and stored the rain. It wasn't impossible. He turned to his tent to find Warden, Mr. Sir, and Mr. Pendanski all looking for him. "Have you seen Zero?" the warden asked. "No." "No sign of him at all?" "No." "Do you have any idea where he went?" "No." "You know, you're not doing him any favors if you're lying," said Mr. Sir. He can't survive out there any more than a day or two." "I don't know where he is." All 3 stared at Stanley as if he was trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. Mr. Pendanski's face was so swollen he could barely open his eyes. There were just slits. "You sure he has no family?" the warden asked Mr. Pendanski. "He's a ward of the state," Mr. Pendanski said. "He was living on the streets when he was arrested. If there's anybody who might ask questions, some social worker who could take interest in him." "He had nobody," said Mr. Pendanski. "He was nobody." The warden thought for a minute. "Okay, I want you to destroy all of his records." Mr. Pendanski nodded. "He was never here," the warden said. Mr. Sir nodded. Can you get into the state files from our computer?" she asked Mr. Pendanski. "I don't want anyone from AG's office to know he was here." "I don't think I can erase him completely all the state files," said Mr. Pendanski. "Too many cross-references. But I can make it so it would be very difficult for anyone to find record of him. Like I said, though, no one will ever look. Nobody cares about Hector Zeroni." Good, said the warden. 2 days later, chapter 32. 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. His name was Brian, but X-Ray called him Twitch because he was always fidgeting. Twitch was assigned Zero's bed and Zero's crate. Vaccines don't last long at Camp Green Lake. Twitch had been arrested, or vacancies, vacancies don't last long at Camp Green Lake. Twitch had been arrested for stealing a car. He claimed he could break into a car, disconnect the alarm, hotwire the engine in less than a minute. I never planned to, steal one, he said. But sometimes, I'll just be walking past a real nice car parked in a deserted area, and, I'll just start twitching. And if you think I twitch now, you should see me when I'm around a car. Next thing you know, I'm behind the wheel. Stanley laid on his scratchy sheets. It occurred to him that his cot was no longer smelled bad. He wondered if the smell had gone away or if he had just gotten used to it. Hey, caveman, said Twitch. Do we really have to get up at 4:30? You get used to it, Stanley said. It's the coolest part of the day. He tried not to think about Zero. It was too late. Either he had made it to Big Thumb or what worried him the most, however, wasn't what it was too late. What worried him the most is what really ate at his insides was the fear that it wasn't too late. What if Zero was still alive, desperately crawling across the dirt, searching for water? He tried to force the image out of his head. The next morning, out on the lake, Stanley listened as Mr. Sir told Twitch the requirements of his hole, as wide and as deep as your shovel. Twitch fidgeted. His fingers drummed against the wooden shaft of the shovel. His neck moved from side to side. You won't be twitching so much after digging all day, Mr. Sir told him. You don't have the strength to wiggle your pinky. He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth and deftly chewed on them and spit out the shells. It isn't Girl Scout camp. The water truck came shortly after sunrise. Stanley got in line behind Magnet and ahead of Twitch. What if it's all too late? What if it's not too late? He watched Mr. Sir fill X-Ray's canteen. The image of Zero crawling across the hot, dry dirt remained in his head. But what could he do about it? Even if Zero was somehow alive after more than 4 days, how could Stanley ever find him? It would take days. He'd need a car or a pickup truck. A pickup truck with a tank of water in the back. Wondered if Mr. Sir had left the keys in the ignition. He slowly backed away from the line, then circled over to the side of the truck. He looked through the window. The keys were in there, dangling in the ignition. Stanley felt his fingers start to twitch. Took a deep breath to steady himself and tried to think clearly. He had never driven before. How hard could it be? It's really crazy, he told himself. Whatever he did, he knew he'd have to do it quickly before Mr. Sir noticed. It's too late, he told himself. Zero couldn't have survived. But what if it wasn't too late? Took a deep breath. Think about this, he told himself. But there wasn't time to think. He flung open the door to the truck, climbed inside quickly. Hey, shouted Mr. Sir. He turned the key and stepped on the gas pedal. The engine revved. The truck didn't move. He pressed the pedal to the floor. The engine roared, but the truck was motionless. Mr. Sir was running to the other side of the car, the door still open. Put it in gear, shouted Twitch. The gear shift was on the floor next to the seat. Stanley pulled the lever back at the arrow that pointed to the letter D for drive. The truck lurched forward, and Stanley jerked back against the seat and tightly gripped the wheel, and the truck accelerated. His foot was pressed on the floor. The truck went faster and faster across the dry lake bed. It bounced over a pile of dirt. Suddenly, Stanley slammed forward, then instantly back as the airbag exploded in his face. He fell out of the open door onto the ground. He had driven straight into a hole. He laid in the dirt, staring at the truck, which stuck lopsidedly into the ground. He sighed. He could blame his no good, rotten, dirty pig stealing great-great-grandfather this time. This time, it was his fault. 100%. He had probably just done the stupidest thing he'd ever done in his short, miserable life. He managed to get to his feet, but he was sore, but didn't think he had broken any bones. He glanced back to Mr. Sir, who remained where he was, staring at Stanley. He ran. The canteen was strapped around his neck, and it banged against his chest as he ran. Every time it hit against him, it reminded him it was empty, empty, empty. Oops.